In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen.
All right. We'll try the best we can. So the topic of today's discussion is suicidal thoughts. It's a very controversial topic, and it's a very sensitive topic. This is not meant to be a lecture. This is meant to be a discussion. So anybody who has a question is more than welcome to ask it. I feel that some people may not be comfortable just standing up and asking the question open. If you feel that way, please feel free to put your question on a piece of paper and just forward it, and without any names or without any signature. The one thing that I wanted to say, something very surprising happened about this lecture, and I want to share it with everybody. I believe that God watches every move, and I believe that God plans every move. So this lecture was meant to be in November. And out of the blue, I get a text message from Yusuf telling me, Abuna's asking whether you want to give this lecture today. And this week, while I'm at work, I get a memo that this month is a National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And actually, there is 1 week dedicated for that, and that week starts tomorrow. So this was like a very weird coincidence. So I feel that this lecture somehow is meant to happen today to fit this time where we can have a lot of internet resources that can be available for us about that topic. And maybe that lecture is meant for somebody who may be going through a rough time and needed to hear it at that time. And that's why just God happened to make it happen today. So what is suicide? Suicide is a desperate solution to a lot of problems. Is it really a solution? No, it's not. But at the mind of that person who gets the thought, it is for that particular moment in their life. What is suicide? We call suicide a double murder. Why do we call it that way? For 2 reasons. It kills the suicidal person, and it kills their family that has to deal with what they have to undergo after that person committed suicide. Who commits suicide? A few years ago, we were not going to be able to answer that question, because it's a taboo, nobody shares it, nobody wants to reveal it, and nobody wants to divulge it. Now that we have the internet, the Facebook, the Twitter, and all the social media, we know that anybody can commit suicide. I have seen suicidal patients from age 6 up to age 94. There is no age that's immune, no ethnic background that gives you any immunity, no age, no religious affiliation, and no gender. Nobody is immune from suicide. And these particular days, we know that even our clergy are not immune. So do we have to say, oh, I'll only think about it for people who are teenagers? No. Even if a child comes to you and say, I'm suicidal, you still have to look at it with a very wide open eye. 2 things are very important about suicide. First thing, we have to keep it in our mind, because the eye doesn't see what the brain doesn't know. So if it's not in our mind, we're not going to see any warning sign. We are like detectives that have to discover it in every day-to-day, every moment of our day. Second, if you get any doubt that there may be any possibility of some suicidal thoughts, believe your heart. Don't ignore those signals. Dig and explore and ask. Okay? The third thing is we have to be very cognizant that we don't contribute. What does that mean? If I'm at school and somebody's being bullied, I don't go and gang up on that person with those bullies. If I'm at church and I see somebody who's being pushed aside and nobody wants to be their friend, I don't do that, and actually I try to do the opposite. And yada, yada, yada. So I try to discover it. I don't ignore it if I see warning sign, and I don't contribute. If I see a vulnerable person, I don't push them to the edge. Why do people commit suicide? There are plenty of reasons to commit suicide. Some of them I may be able to endorse, some of them I not be able to even think about. Some people just want to die. Some other people don't want to die, but they just commit suicide because they are in severe, severe, severe pain. Some people try to commit suicide seeking attention or as a cry for help. Some other people use suicide as a manipulative tool. How am I going to distinguish? And I have to say, to distinguish is extremely difficult. And there are some research that shows that people who are manipulatively presenting with suicidal behavior are still at risk of complete suicide. So meaning, even if you feel that the person in front of you is manipulative, even if you feel the person in front of you is seeking attention, still consider it to the highest level. One time we had a girl, she was with a boyfriend for a bunch of years, And her way of dealing with the relationship issues was to commit suicide. So every time he threatened to break up, she would say, I'm going to kill myself. He turns back and comes right back. She learned that this is what worked. Every time he tries to break up with her, it was the same way. One time, to her bad luck, he called, said, I am going to break up with you and I'm not coming back. She said, okay, while you're on the phone, I will be killing myself. She picked up a chair, put it on top of a table, attached a cord to the chandelier, wrapped it around her neck, and told him, I am doing this right now. I'll kill myself. He's aware of this. It happened 10 times. So he said, okay, whatever. So you know what happened? While she's on the phone with him, to her bad luck, the leg at the table broke. The chair fell. She hanged. He hurt her. Luckily, to her luck, he lived 2 houses from hers. He zoomed to her house. He and her mother were able to cut her loose. She came to the hospital with eyes bulging, fiery red. She was seconds from death. So what I mean by telling you the story is, even if it's manipulative behavior, it still can have a very bad, serious outcome. So don't look at it and don't minimize it because you feel it's manipulation. Whatever the reason of suicide, it is a serious act. And if a person dies, the person cannot come back. What are the types of suicide? As we said, there is a manipulative, attention-seeking part. There is impulsive suicide, where I'm not suicidal, I'm not suicidal, I'm not suicidal, I'm not suicidal. Something happened today. You know, my child died. My wife left me. My job laid me off. I took an overdose of drugs, and I think that I'm putting my family under too much stress. Any kind of acute events that happen in a person's life can trigger an impulsive act of suicide. The other type is the pre-planned suicide. And the pre-planned suicide can be one time or can be a chronic, serious, serial suicidal event. A person may try over and over and over and over again. There are 2 new laws that were signed by Governor Murphy in June. One law was duty to warn, and the other law was related to gun possession. I printed only 1 copy. I'm going to pass it around, not for you to read it, but in case if you want to take the statute number, and then you can look it up and read it yourself. So I'm going to pass it around. Okay, so those 2 laws oblige people to report any suicide or aggressive behavior. Suicide is considered aggression toward yourself, or homicide. And to the point that even people who have gun possession and gun licenses, if you know that they are making any threats, we are obliged, or we are responsible of reporting that for that weapon to be removed. So I'm passing those. I'm not going to go through the details. Those are brand new. Prior to these 2, we have always operated under what's called Tarasov 1 and Tarasov 2. Tarasov 1 and Tarasov 2. And I'm not going to go through the details of this. It's for you to look it up online. All right? So I'm going to go through the screen. I don't like to do PowerPoint presentation, and believe it or not, I don't like to prepare my presentation because I really want them to be from whatever actually happens in real life. But I pulled those few slides just for your information. So the first slide is kind of like a guiding tool of how can I predict, or how can I think of the person in front of me possibly encountering some suicidal thoughts. So the first thing is, I become very suspicious if a person starts talking about it. If a person who's usually happy, jolly, laughing, starts coming to me talking about death and dying, start talking to me about what happens to people who kill themselves, starts talking to me about what could be the dose of Tylenol that if I take will kill me, or would a medication like this one kill me, or will a mix of this whatever thing kill me. So if they start talking about it, be alarmed. If a person starts talking about extreme pain or a situation that would put them on a desperate situation where they would lose control and they cannot control their life anymore, I should become very alarmed. All right? If those people start talking about passive thoughts like, maybe I should not wake up in the morning, maybe there is no reason for me to live, I can't enjoy joy, there is no happiness anymore, I don't feel the happiness no matter what I do. If you see any of those, of those words or any of this behavior, please be alarmed. The second thing is behavior. Any behavior that's not typical for that person. A person who isolates, a person who becomes more irritable, a person who becomes more aggressive, a person who acts reckless, a person who drinks alcohol excessively more than the usual, does drugs more than the usual. A person, which is very important, who starts writing notes to their loved one, who starts to apologize, who starts to give some phone calls and say goodbye to people. This is a very, very, very alarming sign. If you hear any of that, trust your guts and ask the person, do you have any thoughts to end your life? Then the last thing is observation. If you see any change in the mood of a person in front of you, in the form of depression, rage, irritability, and anxiety, if you feel they losing interest, if you feel that they don't feel worthy anymore. If you see any of those three things that are listed there, please be alarmed. I want you to have these two resources in case if you come across any person that you feel will end up in a desperate situation. The one new resource that is new, it's the text message. The number is 741-741. If you text home to this number, they will connect you with a suicide prevention counselor. The other number, which we always had forever, it's the suicide hotline, is 1-800-273-TALK. Both numbers will connect you to a suicide hotline counselor. You can keep the number, and you can hand the number to anybody that you think will benefit from it. Yes, it is anonymous. That's correct. So I pulled 3 videos that I felt will be very beneficial for all of us to hear, and I wanted to share with you. The first video is not my kid. Not my kid. Not my kid in my eyes entails not my brother, not my counselor, not my teacher, not my mom, not my dad, and above any, not me. Okay? So I pulled that video just to show you how parents have questions about why you should not be my kid and the answer that they will provide about that. This video is for 17 minutes. I hope that the audio will be good and we can listen it together. But before we turn it on, I think Mark has a question. That's a very, very good question, all right? As church people or church servants, we are not clinically trained to distinguish is the person really suicidal or not suicidal. When the question comes to you as, I am depressed, I'm desperate, I'm not happy, I don't want to open my eye in the morning, these are all the questions that you can sit and explore and talk further with them to try to distinguish what exactly is going on. If the question comes to you, I want to kill myself, whether it has a plan or does not have a plan, then the duty to warn comes into play. What your role is to prevent it if you think it may occur, but once it does occur, it warrants treatment. And after the video, I will talk about treatment after that. All right? So we're going to start the video, and I hope that it will work well.
Stephanie was my middle child. And she was involved in the tennis team at school. She was a varsity swimmer. She was also involved in 3 youth groups. She had a bubbly personality and was a fairly good student as well.
My wife Roshan, and I had 3 boys, Frank, Matthew and Sean. Sean was a very sensitive child. He was there for people when they wanted to talk to him about things that were going on in their lives and felt empathy for that.
Joanne and I watched TV for about an hour. I went upstairs to go to bed. I knocked on Stephanie's door and didn't get an answer. I yelled down to Joanne for a checker. 5 minutes later, Joanne called, screaming, and I ran back down to the room.
My husband and I had gone into Manhattan that night to see a show. So we left Sean, and he seemed fine. He was busy talking on the phone, working on the computer. We got home just before 12. Don screamed out to me to call 911 as Sean was lying on the floor. Sean committed suicide.
Her death, it tore me to the core. It devastated me. Even 3+ years down the line, we know we're not the same, and we'll never be the same.
I wish we could have that day back and talk to him, or those couple of days whenever there was that mood swing or that change, and really get down to the reason why this was happening.
I'll never forget thinking that night after the police and emergency.
Bread, rice, pasta. I put these fillers and those long chains of them together. Now I have something that your body needs a while to hydrolyze.
I'll never forget thinking that night after the police and emergency.
So while they're fixing the video, so we're not wasting the time, the person who commits suicide wants control. They feel that their life is falling apart and they can't fix it. They don't think ahead of themselves. They just think about that moment. I'm in a very, very painful moment and I want to be out of it. We're human beings. Humans do behavior for a gain. And their gain is to just completely be out of that horrible situation in a second. And they are right. They commit suicide, whatever they are struggling with, where it's gone. All right? But they never think about after those 5 seconds what will happen. Yes, you had control. You had control in choosing to commit suicide. You had control in choosing what to do to commit suicide. The child.
Thinking that.
Right. And you did accomplish what you wanted to control. But you controlled it for 5 seconds, during which you die, correct? After that, you didn't just lose control, but you lost control and will never regain it. Listen to me carefully. Can a person who died after committing suicide, let's say they go to hell, can they just, as soon as they see that they're falling in hell, can they look and say, oh, I did a very bad mistake, oh, I need to go back, I'm so sorry, I did a mistake, send me back. Is that an option? No. Can they be in hell for a week and come and say, I'm sorry, I served my sentence. Now I want to go back to my life? Unfortunately. Can they spend a month there and look at the people and say, you can make fun of me, you can say anything you want, I'll do anything, just please send me back to my life? It's not going to happen. Can they commit suicide in hell to get out of it? Not possible. So what did they do? They gained control for 5 seconds and lost control forever, and ended up putting themselves in God only knows how bad of a situation, and that will be the purpose of the other 2 videos that we will see after we watch this one. What I do? All right.
My daughter had to be the only child in New Jersey that could have done this. We had no idea that teen suicide was a problem.
You may not know, but suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among adolescents.
And the 2nd leading cause of death among college-age youth.
Kids generally are not in crisis. However, some small percentage of kids may be in this type of crisis.
And the question is, what can you, as a parent, do?
Hello, I'm Lanny Berman.
And I'm Maureen Underwood.
The Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide wants to address some of your questions about teen suicide. That's why Maureen and I are here. We'll be answering questions from parents just like you. We found that information and education are essential components of youth suicide prevention.
We'll clarify some of the misinformation about suicide and provide practical, helpful suggestions that you can use with your kids and their friends. Joining us today is a group of concerned parents who'll be asking us some questions about teen suicide. Jill is our first parent. Hi, Jill. How can we help you?
Hi, Maureen. Hi, Lanny.
Hi, Jill.
I hear what you're saying about suicide being the third leading cause of death for kids. But my son is basically a good kid with normal teenage problems. Are you telling me that I have to start worrying that he might kill himself?
Well, obviously, Jill, not every kid is going to be at risk for suicide. But we've known too many parents who felt the way you do. They thought their kids were just having normal teenage problems, and they missed what they later realized were warning signs of suicide. Suicide can happen. It is a real danger for adolescents. So educate yourself about some of the things that may signal your child could be at risk.
It's a good way to organize your thinking about youth suicide's warning signs. Facts. F-A-C-T-S. Facts. F stands for feelings. Feelings of hopelessness, anger, worthlessness, emptiness, anxiousness, or excessive worry. These are examples of feelings that should really concern us. A indicates actions, including things like trying to get access to a gun or pills, risky or dangerous behaviors, increasing drug or alcohol use, and getting into fights. C indicates changes in moods, attitudes, or behaviors. For example, kids who are active may become more withdrawn, quit athletic teams, stop paying attention to personal appearance, daydream more, or start to cut class. It would be impossible to list all the potential behaviors you might see, so concentrating on simply recognizing changes in your child's behaviors is the real key.
And there are some kids who actually make threats, which are expressed by the letter T. These can be very specific verbal statements like, I'm tired of living, or I'm thinking of killing myself, or worrisome innuendos in text messages, blogs, or school assignments. Whether these are very specific or even vague, what these threats are telling us is that the child is thinking about death or suicide, and that's what should concern you. Finally, S refers to situations that may serve as triggers for a suicide or even a suicide attempt. These are situations where your child's coping skills are really challenged, and he or she may not see a viable solution.
So, if you notice anything that makes you concerned, ask your child specifically and directly. If you hear anything that makes you uneasy, get a consultation from a mental health professional. It's really the same thing you would do if you were worried that your child had a physical problem. This is really no different. We have another question, this time from Jerry.
Lenny, I have a question for you. Did you say I should talk to my son about suicide? Look, I'm afraid to bring up suicide.
That's a very important point.
Isn't it better if I don't say anything at all?
Well, no. Unfortunately, a lot of people get confused by this. Just like you would want to talk about drug or alcohol use with your son, it's really important to address the issues of suicide. It's a myth that talking about suicide can plant the idea in someone's mind. Kids hear about suicide from a variety of sources. This is nothing new to them. And in fact, talking about it can be a real relief.
Great, thanks for your help.
Who do we have next?
Hi, Larry and Mariam. I'm Juan.
Hi, Maria.
My question is for Mariam. Are suicidal thoughts a normal part of being a teenager?
That's
That's
another
an
myth.
interesting question, Juan. Many teens will acknowledge that they've had a suicidal thought at one time or another. Feeling that life isn't worth living, though, or that you'd rather be dead is disturbing, especially in adolescence. And if you get any hint that your child may be having these thoughts, it's essential that you ask about them. For many kids, thoughts about dying remain just that, simply thoughts. In a small percentage of kids, however, these thoughts may be accompanied by a plan. That's an extremely dangerous sign that requires immediate intervention. And again, that's why it's so important to ask your child about suicide if you have even the slightest reason for concern. I hope that answers your question, Juan. I believe Karen is next.
Yes. Hi, Maureen. A classmate of my son recently did take his own life.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry to hear about that.
Thank you. He and my son were on the same soccer team, and I'm worried about my son, but I don't know what to say or do.
Well, I can understand the reason for your concern, Karen. What you're talking about is an example of what's called exposure. That's the risk that comes from being exposed to the death of a peer, or even the death of a role model. The first thing you should do is talk to your son about his classmate's death.
Oh, that's tough. I wouldn't even know how to start.
Well, try this. Open the door of conversation by telling him how you feel about his classmate's death, and then ask him how he feels. Don't be surprised if he tells you he doesn't know or he has no reaction at all. It can be hard for teens, even for us grown-ups, to find words to adequately capture the feelings of grief. Remind your son that there is always an alternative to suicide. Encourage him to talk to you if he gets worried about his own thoughts or feelings, or even if he's concerned about one of his friends. And find ways to revisit this conversation, because feelings about a friend's suicide really may take a while to settle. They just don't go away quickly.
Great advice, Maureen. Who do we have next?
Hey, Lanny, George here. My daughter Samantha's school counselor suggested I take her to get some mental health counseling. Apparently, she made some comment about life being too hard or complicated.
Focus with this one, because now school is open, so that's a very common occurrence.
Isn't the counselor overreacting?
Usually, counselors give that kind of advice based on professional experience. This recommendation was most likely developed in response to concerns from Samantha's teachers or a conversation the counselor had with Samantha herself. The first thing I recommend you do is talk to the counselor to find out why she's concerned. Try not to be defensive. Remember, the school is obviously concerned that something you may not be aware of is going on with Samantha, and they think she needs some professional help. It's important for you to understand why the counselor is making this referral, because you'll need this information when you speak with a mental health professional. Most mental health agencies will have releases you can sign that give them permission to talk with the school directly. The school's input can be critical to make sure that Samantha gets the services she needs.
Lanny, Maureen, I'm Michelle, and my son has a drinking problem and is depressed. His doctor prescribed medication for him. Why would you give drugs to someone who has a problem with an addiction?
I can understand your concern, Michelle, but a prescribed antidepressant medication, which I assume is what your doctor recommended?
Yes, you're right. That's what it is.
Well, that's really different from street drugs or alcohol. Prescribed medications are not designed to create the feeling of being high. They're designed to help address your son's symptoms of depression and help him function normally.
Look, I know you're the experts, but I read that antidepressant medication can cause kids to become suicidal. Why in the world would my son's doctor prescribe it for him?
That's a great question, Michelle, because it's been in the press a lot lately. You're right. There's some research that shows a small percentage of youth had thoughts about suicide, and some made attempts when on the medication, but for a much larger percentage of kids, the medication was helpful.
Okay,
Those kids had at least moderate.
So there is two things. I wanted to get the part of the video that was very helpful for the discussion, so we don't need to waste the rest of the time since you're going for the Giants game. Two things I want you to be alarmed with. There is this suicide prevention movement that is across the board. So now the school starting, any child who will be making any suicide comment would be flagged, may get sent to the emergency room. I want to raise some alarm about how our Egyptian society responds to that. And I'll give you a couple of cases, all right? The first case, a kid who's suicidal and truly is suicidal and has been cunning and has tried multiple times. The school counselor found out. They were asked to seek mental health treatment. The mom and the dad, who are professional, very, very good church servants, highly educated, professional, I'm not going to say what specialty, but very well educated people, told their daughter, when you go, lie, don't say. Because if you say, they'll kick you out of school. You don't tell them anything. Nobody should know. And guess what happened? She hasn't had any treatment, and she keeps on trying. And if she does not get any treatment, what will be the outcome of that? What do you guys think? Success. Okay? So that's number one. Another one, a kid, 8 years old, all right? Parents, grandfather was a butcher. taught the kid how to kill the chickens and prepare them. The kid knows how to use the knife. Kid knows how to use the knife to kill. The child has been suicidal, sitting in his closet every day after school, closing the door and fantasizing how he's going to kill himself. School find out. They asked to be seeking mental health treatment. Guess what happened? He did go see a psychiatrist. He was not suicidal or imminent danger at that point, so he was not hospitalized, but mental health treatment was recommended. So they were given a note to school saying, patient may return to school provided compliance with outpatient mental health treatment. Guess what did his parents do? Would they comply with that? Absolutely not. My kid, my 8-year-old Egyptian child will go for mental health treatment? Are you crazy? Absolutely not. We'll find a doctor that give us what we want. So they go to a Park Avenue psychiatrist who charges them $1,200 for interview and give them the note to clear the kid to return to school and admit that your child needs outpatient care. Are they helping their child? What will happen when this kid actually commits suicide? How will these parents live with it? And this is an 8 years old. So we need to understand that, yes, we have faith, and yes, our faith is a protective factor, but because of our faith, God allowed the doctor to learn how to treat those conditions, and we need to accept that treatment. Be very careful when you go through resistance like this. I always direct it to the clergy, to Abuna, because they want to hear from Abuna that this is not against God, that this is actually what God will allow us to do in order to seek help like we get treatment for anything else. So that's number one. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, and this is the point that I'm trying to talk about. Sometimes, well, in those cases, especially church cases, what I would say is we involve clergy. There have been cases that even Amba David got involved with. Okay? Let's say all avenues fail. Remember the paper that I'm circulating? You have a duty to warn. You have a legal duty to warn. If you read those statutes, we are under obligation to report a suicidal patient. If I have a person who's telling me, let's say I have a 10-year-old who's telling me I have a plan to stab myself, and I'm thinking about doing it on October 12th because that's my birthday, and I will celebrate my birthday, but that's it for me, okay? Then I have a duty to notify authority. And against their parents' will, this patient will be admitted and will receive treatment. In New Jersey, that is correct. That is correct. Read Tarasov 1 and Tarasov 2. And I'm passing the paper, take the statutes and read about them as well. Okay? If you don't want to do the call to the police yourself, you can call a suicide hotline and give the information and they will take care of it. All right? So we try all avenues because we really don't want to end up with a legal, or like we don't want to end up putting the families in this situation. We don't want to end up feeling that the parents are going to say, oh, my Sunday school teacher is against me. We do everything we can do to prevent reaching that point, okay? When a person is depressed, when a person starts to feel, I don't want to wake up in the morning, we get the Buna involved, we get the bishop involved, we have the mental health awareness team that is just beginning, and we put their mission on the website. Get in touch with them. They have an email. It's called actually Afraid but Courageous, because to face the need that you need treatment, it makes you very afraid. But you should be courageous and seek it because otherwise it's your life in the bound. Okay, so in that case, if it reaches to a point where I have thought about this, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to share with you guys one thing. One day, and this is like really, I don't know is it funny or stressful or whatever, but I just want to show it to show you the obligation that we all are under, all right? So a couple of years ago, I was working nonstop, like 36 hours straight, all right? And then I get a call from home that my babysitter is having appendicitis. I have to rush her to the ER. So I'm going home, taking my babysitter to the ER, and then I'm returning home at 11:30 after 36 hours of work to look on my Facebook just to give myself a few minutes of deep breath. And here and behold, I found, and the Buna Mark knows about this, I don't know if you can remember, here and behold, I found that one of my contact people put, I will be committing suicide tomorrow, 8 o'clock on my way to work. Okay? All right? This is a person that I accepted in my friends that I did not know her. I accepted her because she had a Buna mark in her connection and she had another Abuna in her connection, and I did not know who she is. So here I'm getting this, and oh my God, goodness, I have a duty to warn. I have to call the police. I have to call the suicide hotline. I need to figure out what to do, all right? I don't have her address. I don't know where she works. I have no information. So I went to Facebook help, all right, to try to flag her. So I called, and it's 11:30 at night after 36 hours of straight work. But you have a duty to warn. Remember, it's 11:30. If I catch her before 8 o'clock, before she stops at the train's track, she's alive. If I ignore it and go to bed, this person is dead, right? Right? It's not a joke. This is real life, guys. This is real life. So I called Facebook, could not locate her, all right? They directed me to her town. So that was Clifton. So I called Clifton police, and I said, but what are we going to do? We don't know, we don't have a full name, we have no address, we don't even know where she works. So I went and looked in her contact list. I found the Buna mark. So I called the Buna mark. It was around midnight. I said, Buna, this is what's going on, blah, 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 blah. Buna mark was able to locate her. We found her. We were able to intervene. Intervention was done, and nothing happened. But the duty to warn is a serious act. You're liable if you don't. It's a law. Tarasov 1 and Tarasov 2, in addition to the new laws, every one of us is bound. The new laws talk more about professionals and teachers and yada yada, but we all are bound. Remember, those are human beings, those are soul, and if they die, it's not reversible. We can prevent it, but we cannot change it were it to happen, okay? So second thing I wanted to talk about, and I keep on losing my track of thoughts, the medication. We don't know if the medication actually triggers the suicide thoughts or no. What we know is, and there was an article that I was reading this morning, the FDA warning about suicidal risk in youngsters with medication is preventing a lot of them from actually receiving help, because you're more suicidal with untreated depression than suicidality because of the medication. And it's not a cause-risk effect. We don't know. What we know clinically is that medication may cause some activation. So when a person who's depressed and they're like tired, exhausted, they can't move, they're like, I have suicide thoughts, I have no energy to even act on. You take your medication in the first 2-3 weeks, your energy gets better, it's activating. But your mood takes longer time to get better. So imagine you're still depressed here and there, and you are having a lot of energy, and then somebody looks at you and say, hey, you're ugly. Guess what happened? Suicide thoughts pump again. Now you're still depressed. That didn't get better, but you have energy. So before you didn't have energy to act on it, now you had the energy, so when the thoughts pump to your head, what will happen? You are capable of acting on it. All right? There is I'm not going to talk about this topic, but I'm going to just throw it in there. Euthanasia for suicidal patient. It's against Christianity. We don't believe in it. We don't accept it. It's a done deal. It's not something that we agree with. Committing suicide, taking your own life is a sin. In my eyes, and this is my personal opinion, this is the worst sin because it's irreversible. If I commit suicide, I cannot confess and just erase it. It's not the case. A person can commit adultery, a person can steal, a person can lie, a person can do forgery, and they are still alive. They can go to a priest today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, and they can confess, and God will forgive them. I commit suicide, I have no way of repenting, I have no way of confessing, this is it. So I feel that this is the most severe or like the worst sin that does exist, and if we can prevent it, then we're giving the person a lot of options. Also, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're having panic attack, if you have substance abuse problem, if you have learning disability, if you have gender issues, if you have social issues, marital issues, as long as you're alive, you have options. If I had 5 boyfriends, they broke up with me, I'm alive, I can get 5 more. I'm sorry. If I am dead, hopefully I can't get boyfriends when I'm dead, okay? So, all right. My dad was a priest, and my brother is a monk, and my aunt is a nun. So, and the next two videos are very, very religious. So the next two videos is something that I began interested in searching years ago, maybe since I was in high school. I came across a case who committed suicide and was revived and came back. And her story was very similar to the story that you're going to hear in this video. So we're going to look at the second video now.
Those who tried to commit suicide and failed are another story, a horror story. Typical of the experiences told by people who survived after attempting to take their own lives is the case of this 22-year-old bride-to-be from Gary, Indiana. For obvious reasons, her name cannot be made public, but it happened in April of 1975. This is her story, as she later told it to a psychiatrist. It began on the fateful day she went to her fiancé's house to make dinner.
Eric and I were to be married in less than a week. We were in love, and I had never been happier.
Guys, I really want you to listen to this with an open eye. This is not just a video online. This is reality that happened. We do see those cases a lot of time, except for confidentiality, we can't really present the actual cases. So listen to it with an open eye. It's not fakey, it's not a movie,
He'd
it's
met
reality.
another woman, and he'd fallen in love with her, and he couldn't marry me. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what to do. I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment. I had to get out of there.
And that's an example of acute suicide. He did not plan it, just was a spur of the moment.
Like I had never loved a man before. Our wedding invitations had already been sent out, and my parents were going to be here in 2 days. How was I going to face them? My whole world had fallen apart. I didn't care anymore. I decided to kill myself. It was as if the whole world had exploded around me. And then there was only silence and darkness. Suddenly I was going through a long, dark subway. The pain was excruciating. I tried to scream but couldn't. And I was so cold, terrified. And something started striking out at me. Hands kept ripping at my skin. No, they weren't hands. They were snakes. I came out of the tunnel into some horrible swamp where people, all of them dead, were moaning and crying out. The smell of death was everywhere. Oh, God, pray for me.
That's the part we call double suicide, because as it affects the person who commits suicide, it affects the family too.
My children would never be born because I had killed myself before they could even be conceived. Get away from me! I want to go back! I want to live! I want to live!
That's impossible. She was dead.
Could God or some unknown...
I'm going to end here. So I just wanted you to see the experience and how horrifying it is. And you can imagine if this girl did not come back to life, how was her eternity going to be? It's always very protective when you talk to a person who has those thoughts, to tell them that even though you will get your wish for a few minutes, yet you're going to end up in hell forever and you're not going to be able to come back. Because of the Giants game, I don't want to talk much and take your time, because I think the next video is very good and it talks about a lot of things from Christian perspective. So I wanted to give you a chance to see that one. It's a little bit longer than this. So we'll see it together.
One day, she took a gun her mother had and put it against her chest.
This is a 15-year-old. She did that when she was 15 years old.
Her body was rushed to the hospital, but she said her soul went somewhere else.
I was convinced that there was no way to live a completely happy life. And if I couldn't live happy, I didn't want to live at all. It began with a divorce, a broken home. And I believe that through that, my mentality began to form and began to develop a sense of rejection, because I didn't understand. I was a small child and didn't understand adult things. And so I felt the breakup was all about me. That sense of rejection just really grew. I began to perceive myself as a burden to other people. And so I would take little bitty comments that were relatively insignificant. I would make it into a really big deal. Those little seeds in my life, I began meditating on over and over. And as I grew, the rejection began to grow. What is wrong with me? And so I believe that the only answer for me was to end my life. I walked to my mother's room thinking I don't want anyone to see me, because I'm so determined to end my life, to end the void, to end the suffering, to end the loneliness, that nothing was going to stop me. I began crying out and I began screaming out to God, God, forgive me. And the gun went off.
Well, she's written a book called Delivered. Tamara LaRue is here with us. Hey, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Pat.
It's a tremendous book.
Thank you.
That was a 38 police special.
Yes.
Your mother had in her drawer. I understand a voice said to you, don't shoot your face.
It did, Pat. When I was headed on my mission, I was so determined not to live. And when I held the gun initially, I placed it up to my head. And a voice spoke to me and said, remove that from your head and place it at your heart. And I argued with this voice, and I said, no, because I am going to complete this mission that I have started with. And so all of a sudden I get a vision of what I would look like if I was, to some bizarre reason, survive that. And then I got a vision of what I would look like, and I felt a compassion for my family. And so I listened to the voice, and I removed the gun from my head, and I placed it down at my heart.
You pointed to your chest. You had it straight going down this way into your heart.
I did. I knew where my heart was, and so I took the gun, and I aimed it directly for my heart, because I was not going to miss. And I wanted that gun to send me into eternity, because I was so desperate for my pain and my suffering to end.
So you pulled the trigger and there was a loud bang, and then what happened?
Pat, when I pulled that trigger, I knew my body was dying. I felt the blood rushing through my lungs. Death gripped my body. I became blind. I became deaf. And as my soul left my body, I began traveling faster than the speed of light. And I began falling and falling and falling. And all of a sudden, this explosion happened on the inside of me. It was as if there was like a sulfuric type acid burn that consumed me in every way. It was so hideous and terrifying. There are no words to describe the level of pain and the type of burn that I was experiencing.
What was it?
It was hell, Pat. It was what the Bible describes as hell. It was the fire of hell. And when I looked around, not only was I in a place of death, but I now had become death. I was no longer in a place where there was peace. I was in a place of total torment.
Were you terrified?
I had become fear.
Oh, you've become fear.
I had become a being of fear. You know, the Bible describes that death is the absence of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in the absence of God, in the absence of anything good, your soul I had become a being of fear. You know, the Bible describes that death is the absence of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in the absence of God, in the absence of anything good, your soul
So while they're fixing this, I just want to talk about an analogy that I always thought about. We are energy. We are soul that is embedded inside a body. It's exactly like when you want to be in a place, you have to wear what's custom for this place. If I'm going to a wedding, I'll wear a gown that's for a wedding. If I go for a job interview, I'll put a suit. If we need to live on earth, we have to have a body. Our body is our vehicle by which we live. We take care of it, we're alive, we take care of it and be healthy, we live a little bit longer. Our body gets old, gets sick, we lose that body, but our soul is there. So while we're living this 100-year in life, God willing, 100-year, we are learning and we're using our body as a vehicle. Am I gonna make my vehicle to dictate what I wanna do? No, my vehicle is for me to use to reach my goals. It's not for me to please my vehicle. Am I gonna like shower my vehicle and decorate it and like give it the best oil possible, or maybe like use energy fluid for my vehicle? No, no. Am I going to put in my body liquor, drugs? Am I going to just focus on how my hair looks, how my nails look? Remember, your vehicle, you need to maintain it in order to be able to live, but you don't have to let your vehicle be your priority, because that's not what's going to go on with you. Once your vehicle expires, for whatever reason, age, illness, not maintaining it well, doing drugs and alcohol, committing suicide, your soul is going to hell or to heaven, according to what you have learned, and you have used your vehicle to get you through those years, and then and only then comes in the long-term and forever destiny for your soul. The vehicle is temporary. The 100 years we spend here are temporary, but the one to come is eternal. So if I decide to kill my vehicle, destroy my life, and commit suicide, my next move will be a move for a long period of time and not in good direction. If I decide to live a good life and follow the commandment and do what I need to abide by, then my soul, after he loses, or after my soul loses the vehicle, then my soul will be in a good place for a good, long, forever time. Is it working? Okay, so I don't know if there is any way, I don't know if Brian is here, can help us out, or another IT person can help us out with that video. He's not here, so he's on the spot now. Anybody else is able to help with this or no? Okay, so I'm going to just let you know which video it is, and you guys can feel free to look it up when you go home. When you go home, please, it's the National Suicide Awareness Month, so there are so many resources online. If you go to Google and put National Suicide Awareness, you will be able to pull a lot of information. I just want to pull this video and tell you exactly how to locate it. Just bear with me 1 second, because I feel that this video is going to be very informative. So this video is on YouTube, titled Committing Suicide Send You Hell, and it's Suicide Attempt Survivor Testimony. That's the title of that video on YouTube. Committing Suicide. Is it coming?
Christ was.
All right, we'll give it one more shot,
And
I guess.
here I am in this state of agony. I knew their thoughts, I knew their emotions, I knew the will, I knew everything I could think upon. My wisdom was in its fullness. It was like a Harvard degree instantly, you know, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. In that hideous state of a burning torment, the only knowledge that mattered was that Jesus Christ was Lord. And here I am in this state of agony, indescribable agony, and the only thing that mattered was that I never surrendered to the lordship of Jesus Christ.
Was this like regret in your mind as part of that fear?
Absolutely regret. There was so much regret and shame and guilt that I had believed a lie and that I had believed the deceit. And when I looked out across the lake, across the heavens, I could see the entire universe, Pat. And it was like the earth was magnified. And there was a mutual feeling, a mutual understanding of everyone, the thousands and millions of people that were there with me, that we did not want anyone to go where we were. We wanted people to go back to earth and warn everyone, don't believe the lie, do not be deceived by your enemy, do not come here.
Is that in your mind prior to this that ever could have seen anything as horrible as that?
No, no.
Never.
And now I read the Bible and I see the Bible, how it describes hell.
Yeah.
And I look at my experience and there are no words to describe what I experienced, Pat.
Was there any end to it for these people?
No, there was no end.
No end?
No end. And you could look across the Gulf expanse and you could see heaven. You could see the peace, the joy, the love, the wholeness. And you knew you were never going to experience that because time does not exist in eternity. Time does not exist at all. And so you know you are there forever with no relief. The burn will never stop. The screaming will never stop. And the only thing you can do is hope that no one else will come where you are.
It's the most horrible prospect when you think of it. I mean, a human mind can't conceive of anything as absolutely awful as that.
You cannot. The human mind cannot, in our physical state, cannot understand spiritual things at all. But you know, Pat, what is so amazing is God's love was so incredible that before I actually shot myself, I cried out to God to forgive me. And in that cry of desperation of forgiveness, God heard me. And he is so faithful to his word and to his promise that in my screaming and in my agony and in the revelation of what I experienced, God came down from heaven and this hand scooped me up, Pat, and picked me up. And I realized I was not in hell because I shot myself. Because no act can take you to hell as if no act can take you to heaven. We are saved by faith.
Yeah, okay.
And so I realized that I wasn't there by my actions. I was there because I didn't receive Jesus as my Lord. And so when this hand picked me up and took me over the vast expanse, took me over that Gulf fix, and it's huge, but to God it's just like a simple,
But that's what
simple
Jesus said
line.
in the parable. There's a great gulf between us fixed.
Yes.
And there was a great gulf.
A great gulf, and it was of nothingness.
Yeah.
Dark, just nothingness. And when I went over that, and I entered into God's presence, Pat, now, you can't describe God's presence either, but it was love. And I had now left a place of death and torment and darkness, and now I had entered into a place of love and light. And I experienced God's wholeness. I experienced his grace and his mercy. And there was unity with Christ that is indescribable. My pain was gone. My torment was gone. And I was in this presence of total wholeness. And you could see the lights, the beauty of the stones and the lights reflecting in heaven. And the very sight of them was rejuvenating and just energizing.
And they
it was
were communicating
magnificent.
with each other. The people were talking.
Oh yes, they were all communicating. However, I was restricted.
You were.
I was not allowed to take part in any of that. Although I knew that was going on and although I saw those things, I was not allowed to take part of that or to see many things in detail. There was many things understood, and the knowledge was free and wisdom was free. And so as I traveled over the heavens and I was cleansed of my sin, and I came back, and there are, in the spiritual world, you're not confounded to the restrictions of the physical world. And so I came right back into the roof of my home, and they laid my body, the vessel of God laid my body back, my soul back into my body. And when he did that, I instantly could see and hear again. And I knew at that moment that I was surrendering to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. And I knew
So we're going to stop
that
here.
whenever
That ends the discussion for today. I hope that you guys got something from it, and I hope that it will be beneficial for you or for anybody that you will transfer the information to. We're going to interrupt streaming right now because I need 5 minutes to talk about something else with you guys if you have 5 minutes to give. If you want to run for the giant game,